Welcome back to Movies TV Mad. You can follow me on X at Movies TV Mad and on Instagram and on Threads at Movies TV Mad X. A very warm welcome to Saturday's edition of the DC Universe Daily. Spare a thought for poor James Gunn right now. He's been spending months and months and months building up the positivity for his brand new DC Universe. Building up positivity for his Superman film. This time last week, we were oozing about the new Superman symbol, right? He revealed the S shield with snow on it. It was exciting. We were talking about it. A week later, Zack Snyder goes on a very controversial podcast, turns up with his sledgehammer and all James Gunn's, hard work to bring positivity into the DC fandom is done. This is Zack Snyder proving a point. And the fact that he brings up again that if he gets to do a Dark Knight Returns film, he'll never do another DC film, again is like telling them, let me do this and I'll leave you in peace. He's holding WB, James Gunn and DC Studios, to ransom. There's no question about that, because you have to question the motivation of Zack going on that controversial podcast. I like Joe Rogan. I think Joe's really cool. I love his podcast, but he's very controversial. And he's a lot more controversial than Geeks and Gamers are. And Zack was going to do a charity stream with that YouTube platform. Then he turned it down, which didn't go down well, of course. But it's interesting, isn't it? If you think about it. He turns down Geeks and Gamers, but then goes on one of the most controversial podcasts. I mean, I've got entertainment DNA going through my system. My dad's work was everything to him, and we knew about it. And nothing much surprises me in this industry. But when I heard that Zack went on to Joe Rogan's podcast, I certainly didn't see that coming. And he's trending. And it doesn't matter if they love you. It doesn't matter if they hate you. In this business, it's important that they're talking about you. And all Zack Snyder has had to do is go on Joe Rogan's controversial podcast and say that Batman must kill. And for DC not allowing him to kill is a bad thing. How many times have you gone on your Threads feed or your X feed and you've heard, tell me Zack Snyder doesn't get Batman without telling me Zack Snyder doesn't get Batman. Get Batman or not. And I love Zack Snyder. I love this film behind me. It's a stunning visual marvel with lots of great, themes running through the movie. I love BVS and I adore the Snyder Cut. Good luck making a better Justice League movie than that, James Gunn. We will see what James can do. But James came in to take over a very, very difficult gig. And I don't envy him. As much as I've loved Superman all my life, and I'd love to work on a DC property and love to work on a Superman movie, just to be on the set would be a beautiful thing. But at the end of the day, I don't envy him. Because Zack Snyder, because of the way he does these movies, and because they're divisive, he has divided the fandom, bless him. And I love him. And I love his films. You're talking to a fan. But what does it say to WB and DC Studios if this guy can just do a podcast and get trending? And it's not good. It's not good. Let's get this absolutely clear. This is not a good thing for DC Universe. This is not a good thing for DC Studios. Make no mistake about that. As I say, a week ago we were talking about an exciting reveal of the Superman symbol from the new movie that James Gunn is actually, already started principal photography on, right? It's exciting. As a DC fan, I'm excited. I can't deny that. But this man does a podcast and everyone's talking about him. You're not talking about James Gunn, are you? You're talking about Zack Snyder. Whether you're hating on him or you're loving him, Zack Snyder has triggered you on purpose. Here's the thing. If you think your takes hurt Zack Snyder, you're wrong. He's loving this because he now knows you're so stupid that 100,000 of you are going to hate watch his Rebel Moon sequel, that you're going to shit on it. But it doesn't matter. Once he gets your view, he gets your view. When Velma got your view and you started hate watching it, right, Reaper or whoever, it doesn't matter what you say on your YouTube channel, because all you care about is making money and getting views. I get it. I understand. I find Reaper hilarious. I don't know how he gets away with half the stuff he says. But anyway, and I don't agree with all the stuff he says. It's pretty deep, isn't it, if you think about it? But anyway, once the man gets your view, he gets your views. Now, is that the motivation to trigger people? Because it certainly had the desired effect. But surely Zack Snyder has better things to do than trigger the public. So the motivation, as I say, I never saw the day where Zack Snyder would go on a controversial podcast. And as I say, Joe's podcast is very, very controversial. It's amazing the platform that Joe's built up. And he's had a lot of famous people on that platform. But Zack Snyder, the man who refused to do a charity stream on Geeks and Gamers because he came out publicly said, and he said he doesn't like certain, views, and that's why he wouldn't do it. But is Joe Rogan any better? I don't know. I like him. Don't get me wrong. I've got nothing against Joe Rogan. I don't. But it's a very controversial podcast, and I think it's a very weird thing to do. Rebel Moon 2 comes out next month. He's also dropping 2 director's cuts of both movies. It's very, very exciting. Does Zack Snyder need this attention? I don't know. We now know that Dan Lin is going to be controlling the film section of Netflix. Dan Lin is a guy who was on a podcast months and months ago, many months ago, maybe years ago, and he was putting Snyder fans down. And he nearly got the DC Studios gig as well. And some people have said, well, this is bad news for Zack Snyder. He's probably going to lose his job. He's probably not going to get to do any more projects after Rebel Moon. And maybe that's true. But he's certainly not going to go quietly, is he? So I will be honest with you. I'm very, very surprised that Zack Snyder, normally a very quiet man, even though he's a controversial director, and he's a divisive director who makes divisive movies, there's no question about that. And look, whatever you say about him, he's won. He's made 4 DC movies his way. Watchmen, Man of Steel, Batman vs. Superman, Dawn of Justice, the Snyder Cut. He's done it. He's done more than you and me, DC fans, will ever do in the industry. His movies have kind of made money. Now, I don't think Watchmen made a hell of a lot of money. Man of Steel made just under 700 million. BVS nearly 900 million. That's not bad, but not enough for the studio, as we know. And from personal experience, the physical media copies of the Snyder Cut was sold out for weeks because I couldn't get one. So I know that. I know that's not bullshit, or they didn't make enough. I don't know. But it was all very, very popular. Not only has he got a fandom, right, which is very, very important, he's also, there's a quiet minority who also like Zack Snyder's films as well. And internationally, the Snyderverse was very, very popular. And if you look at the numbers the DCEU movies made last year, in China, for example, they weren't great. Now, interestingly enough, Jason Momoa's Aquaman and the Lost Kingdom actually did very, very well in China. A lot of its money came from China, so he is very popular. Maybe they equate him with Zack Snyder. That wouldn't surprise me. And we'll see where we are with DC when Superman is released next July, because it's not a long... Look, it's not a long time away, people. It may seem like a long time. It's just over a year, right? And we're going to see that movie. And it's going to be interesting how James's Superman compares to Zack Snyder's Superman. Obviously, it'll be night and day. We know that. It's going to be very different. Someone made an interesting point. When they were talking about Man of Steel as they were making it and as they were about to release it, the talk was making it modernising it for a new audience where James Gunn, someone made this point on Threads, very interesting, but James Gunn is celebrating the history of Superman. And this guy said it's almost like when they were making Man of Steel, they were ashamed of Superman's history, where James Gunn is celebrating it. That's an interesting point. As I say to people who don't like Zack Snyder and his DC, I always say to them, look, you're entitled to your opinion, but I love his movies. But if I think they make a good point as well, I'll agree with them, right? As I say, I am not biased to that side or that side. I just love DC. I love great stories. I love entertainment. I love film. And I love TV. I'm not here to be, biased towards one director or the other. That's not the way I'm swinging. I will defend Snyder if I think, people are saying the wrong thing about him. Now, in terms of him understanding Batman, that's an interesting thing for the comments down below. Do you think Zack Snyder understands Batman when he says that Batman has to kill? What do you think? Now, it's interesting, and it's a bit like my boy Superman killing in Man of Steel, which wasn't Snyder's decision, actually, although a lot of people think it is. That was David Goyer's decision. But in Batman vs. Superman, Dawn of Justice, Batman does kill. There's no question about that. Now, that never triggered me. But when he says that Batman must kill, or, he has to have that challenge, you have to challenge your gods, and he talks about fans not wanting their god to be challenged. It's very, very interesting, isn't it? It's a very interesting term. So I don't mind Batman killing in BVS, but if you notice in Zack Snyder's Justice League Snyder Cut, he doesn't kill any people. He kills the parademons, but I don't think he kills any people because he's redeemed. So I don't mind in BVS that he was deconstructed, because in BVS, Batman and Superman were deconstructed to be reconstructed. That's the essence of characterizations and great storytelling throughout the ages. And that's okay. You need stakes, you need your characters to go on a journey, and that's okay. But as a rule, he's saying Batman should kill. And if that's the case, I don't agree with that. No, I don't think Batman should kill. I don't think Batman has to kill. As I say, I'm fine in that movie, BVS, where he's been deconstructed for a little while of that film. I'm fine with that. That's okay. That doesn't offend me. I love BVS. I love Snyder's work. I love the way he makes films. But as a rule, I don't believe Batman should kill. I absolutely don't. And just because you admire Zack, just because you're a fan of his, you can admit it. Batman shouldn't kill as a rule. Why should he? That's not who he is, right? And you can say, oh, well, he killed in Batman Begins. He inadvertently let Ra's al Ghul die, right? But he didn't murder him, right? There is a difference. There is a difference. You can point out about Batman 89 and Batman 92 if you like, right? But there's a difference. I think there is a difference between those films and what Snyder did. I think that's very important. It's like the Snyder fans that keep on coming after Superman 2 and saying that Christopher Reeve's Superman murdered Zod, Zod, Non and Ursa. Now, all I saw was that these people just slid down the ice. At least I didn't see their necks snap, right? So whether they're dead or alive, I don't know. Because basically all I saw was 3 people getting tapped, right? But one, Ursa getting tapped by Lois Lane, right? That really shouldn't have done much anyway, even though they lost their powers. And obviously, Superman chucked the other 2. Where they went, I don't know. But we didn't see any blood. We don't know if they're dead or alive. And what Snyder fans forget, Zack didn't decide to have Superman kill. I'm sure he loved it and I'm sure he agreed with it. I'm sure it's down his alley. But as I say, that was David Goyer's idea. And not even Christopher Nolan was okay with that. And you can check out the THR and Variety articles of the time. That's there. That's official. That's a fact. I'm not making it up. But it is controversial. Now, I don't mind canon being broken. So Zack broke DC canon by having Batman kill. David Goyer broke Superman canon by having putting Superman in a position where he had no choice but to break Zod's neck, right? Breaking canon's fine, but it depends on the canon you break. Smallville is the ultimate canon breaker. Some Snyder fans, the loud minority, call Smallville mid. No, to me, it's the second best live action interpretation of Superman, right next to Superman 78 in my ranking. Then it's Man of Steel. Then it's probably Superman 2. No, probably actually Superman Returns, then Superman 2, then Superman 3. But Smallville's very high up in my live action Superman adaptation ranking. What Smallville was able to tell Superman stories differently, different type of Superman stories. Smallville was not mid. And if you really do think that Smallville was mid, you know, never mind understanding Batman, you don't understand Superman. Superman didn't even have to wear a costume in Smallville. Yeah, he was young Clark Kent, he was pre-Superman. But he had the powers, and he was a hero, and he's everything that character has always been and should be. But they broke canon. Lex Luthor was living in Smallville in that stunning castle. He was, you know, friends with Clark for a time on the show. We knew full well that they were going to become enemies. It was very, very compelling. Lex Luthor had a father for the first time. Not even in DC have we ever seen his father. It was an amazing show that did everything. Created a pre-Superman Justice League. We met a Justice Society, a Dr. Fate. Accomplishments amongst accomplishments. So why was Smallville able to break so much canon with DC Comics and with the movies, but not be as divisive? I'm not saying everybody embraced it, but it wasn't as divisive as the Snyderverse was. As I say, you've got to pick where you break canon. We spoke about the Superman radio show creating canon that's still canon in the Superman mythos today. I thought about this the other day. Maybe the reason they changed all that canon in the radio show back in the 40s and 50s is so they wouldn't have to pay Siegel and Schuster any more money. Yeah, I was thinking about that. I was on a patio, smoking my cigarette, drinking a cup of Nescafe, and I was thinking, that's why they changed so much canon, so they wouldn't have to pay them. Poor Jerry and Joe. And I bet you nobody's looking after their families today. Very, very sad what Hollywood and these big companies do to people, the pioneers, you know. But anyway, we're not talking about that. We're talking about Zack Snyder. So Smallville was able to get away with breaking canon. Now, there is a 1960s Superboy comic where Lex Luthor and Clark Kent do meet once, become friends, but then a chemical accident, you know, makes Lex go bald, and he gets jealous of Clark and they become enemies. So there is scripture there, but it's not, you know, really is a canon break. And there's a lot of canon breaks in Smallville. You know, Lois Lane being in Smallville, meeting Clark before he becomes Superman. That's a huge break of the canon. And people were talking about it at the time. Even I wasn't sure if Lois Lane should be in Smallville, the television show, when I first heard she was going to be in it. But that first scene of Erica in the car putting the cigarette out, then putting it out, magic. You knew it was going to work, and it did. Smallville accomplished so much, but I do think it's important you choose what canon you break, because Smallville's Clark Kent, as I say, was always that character. He always felt like Superman. I used to love it when he wore the blue jacket, or shall I say the red jacket and the blue top. It may not be the costume, but it's the Superman colours, and Tom looked great. It really worked. Smallville were geniuses. It proves you can break canon if you improve on the past canon. Because I think a lot of the things that Smallville introduced were brilliant. So if you change things wisely, in a good way, but you're not trying to change the character, you know, I think people are not going to come after you so much. Look, there's a lot of gatekeepers in fandoms. I don't think they do it on purpose, by the way. They grew up with a certain way of watching these characters. You know, remaking pre-existing characters, reinventing pre-existing characters is very difficult. And I'm of the mind that any director, any showrunner who reinvents these characters should be allowed to have their own voices on it. I said it to James Gunn on Threads yesterday, and he gave me a like, by the way. You know, you're writing and directing a film about my favourite character in fiction. You know, I'm trying not to have any preconceived ideas. And what I want from any reinvention is for that director to have their own voice, to be inspired by the previous iterations, but do something new. And that's what I said to him. And I think that's right. I don't need James to copy what Zack or Dick, right, or the Lois and Clark show did. We've got that. If we're not going to get a new iteration, what's the point? So I admired what Snyder did. Snyder, Goyer, I said this the other day, Snyder, Goyer and Nolan were very brave. New music, a new type of Superman for the modern day. Man of Steel was very brave. But unfortunately, box office affected the mentality of the Snyderverse and the DCEU. We went from Man of Steel to a brand new direction in BVS. Because I can promise you the people leading the the DCEU narrative wasn't Snyder during Man of Steel. It was Goyer and Nolan who were really in charge of the narrative, and they had a different idea of what direction the DCEU was going to go in. They got rid of them, Snyder stays on, then he comes up with BVS and he's got a new direction. There's no talk of the Codex anymore, which is a shame because the Codex really, all that is based on John Byrne's Man of Steel graphic novel. That's what Man of Steel is based on. And I think that was a really good direction to go in. But we dropped all that because Man of Steel barely made 700 million. So then they said, let's shove Batman and Superman in a movie. That wasn't Zack's idea either. But he went with it. And he did it, in his Zack Snyder way. So already the studio are being reactive and Snyder has to adjust what he does, for their reactiveness. And then he does Justice League. Then they drive him out. They do to him what they did to, Nolan and Goyer. There's no question about that. Right? And I'm surprised Nolan didn't make a louder noise when he was driven out and Goyer was driven out after Man of Steel. Really, when Nolan and Goyer, I've said this before as well, when Nolan and Goyer were driven out, that's when the DCEU were truly fucked. Zack Snyder is at his best as a director, doing this visual type of storytelling, right? Maybe not telling the story so much. And Nolan and Goyer doing the story while Snyder directed really worked out for Man of Steel, even though it didn't make the money the studio wanted. Doesn't matter. But as I say, Snyder has made 4 DC movies, so it doesn't matter the hate that you give him. The question is, will Zack ever get the chance to, tell his Dark Knight Returns live-action adaptation? Look, I've probably got more chance of making that movie, which is none, than Zack Snyder has. But then I should learn not to write him off. Because we thought releasing the Snyder Cut, even though we kept on fighting for it, was an impossibility, that the odds were long. And look what happened. Zack found a way to get that done. With us. Working with us, of course. So I am a Zack Snyder fan. But unlike some, I don't think he's perfect. I don't think he walks on water. Nobody does. Nobody's perfect. Nothing made with human hands is perfect at the end of the day. But it's pretty clear he knew exactly what he was doing the other day. I still think it's odd that he went on Joe Rogan. It's weird shit. But if this guy can just turn up on a podcast and take all the trends away from DC Universe and James Gunn and his Superman movie, I think that makes Zack very, very dangerous to WB, and it does. And it proves to you, and it proves to me, should I say, that he's still very, very effective. Because as I say, hate watching is still watching. If people go to the cinema to watch a Zack Snyder film because they hate him, just to see it and just to hate on it and just to do videos about it, or when they start watching Rebel Moon and they start hate reviewing it, right, like they did with the first film and they're going to do with the second film, of course. Look, Batman is a pre-existing property. People feel very, very protective of him, okay? So there's a lot of people, probably most people, who believe Batman, in fact, shouldn't kill. But he did. He did in one film. And if you actually listen to the podcast with Snyder on, it's very, very interesting. He doesn't just talk about one thing. He talks about his sensibilities. I like Zack's sensibilities in terms of filmmaking and the deep dives he takes with Joseph Campbell, the hero's journey and all the mythic characters. He's got some very, very interesting knowledge. And look, I don't know why people hate Zack so deeply. I can understand why you don't agree with the way he makes movies and tells stories. I can agree with that. But I don't understand the level of hate he gets. I will never understand that. I think that's a mystery. But, as I say, he has proven a point here, that he can trend, that he can get you talking, that he can trigger you. And when someone can do that, they become very, very dangerous, because WB are trying to rebuild a new DC universe, move away from Snyder. But it looks like there's no getting away from Zack Snyder, because he won't allow it. He won't allow it. You know, I've been told by a multitude of directors and people in Hollywood, Mick, move on. Zack wants to move on. Does that Joe Rogan interview make you think that Zack wants to move on? He's clearly very much in love with these DC characters and wants to do more. In a way, it's very, very tragic, because they're not going to let him do it. And the only way, I mean, he has got a little window of opportunity, and it's because they're in so much debt, in trouble. So as I said the other day, there is a little 2 to 5% chance of selling Snyderverse to Netflix, because they're in a financial disarray. So there is that chance. It's not out the window. So it really is interesting what happens. And also, of course, James Gunn's Superman movie has to make a hell of a lot of money. Has to make around $850 to $1 billion. There's no question. And you can sit there and deny that, but it's the truth. He has to make a great movie. It has to click for everyone. And as I've said from the beginning, I'm open to it. I'm here for it. I'm hyped for it. Superman, I love him. He's my character. You know, I said it on Threads as well yesterday. There will be a lonely little boy, like I was a lonely little boy when I first saw Superman the movie, that will be looking up to David Cornswept as Superman, and that's a powerful thing. That's not hot air. That's the truth. That's how special this character is. There were many little boys who looked up to Henry as Superman. You know, Henry Cavill, let's not get it twisted. The reason he's not Superman is because of decisions made above his pay grade, from his own director, from the studio itself. Brandon Routh isn't Superman, or wasn't Superman, and only got to do one movie because of decisions made above his pay grade. And then his very own director tried to blame him and said he would have brought in another director, another actor to play Superman. Disgusting. I mean, look, if you look at Bryan Singer, if he's got anyone to blame for Superman Returns, the film, I believe, is full of great moments, and I enjoy rewatching it, that he decided to do a sequel to, you know, the greatest version of Superman ever, Christopher Reeve. There was never anyone who was going to be good enough. No actor could ever fill those boots. It's bad enough convincing people that somebody else can be Superman apart from Christopher Reeve, let alone getting some poor actor, an inexperienced actor like Brandon Routh, having to play Christopher Reeve's Superman, which he actually did quite well. So it was a bad idea. And the execution of creating the world that Christopher Reeve was in originally and making it look like a sequel to Superman 2, it didn't feel like that world. It didn't feel like Donner's world. So Bryan Singer should have blamed himself. So, you know, this is the world of acting. This is an actor's life. You know, decisions are made above their pay grades and they lose their jobs from no fault of their own. As I say, the reason Henry isn't Superman anymore, it's nothing to do with him, because he was a great Superman at the end of the day. But now David Cornswept is Superman for at least one movie. Will it be same old, or will he be Superman for years to come? Nobody really knows. Excuse me. But this is the thing with Zack Snyder. He knows. He knows how to wind you up. He knows how to trigger you, and he's doing that. So, listen, look, the Zack Snyder story, I think Zack Snyder's fascinating. He fascinates me. I really do. His story, his DC story is fascinating. He did a DC movie in Watchmen. It was controversial, but then he was allowed to come back and have the keys to the kingdom again. I mean, it was an amazing decision, and it was Christopher Nolan's decision. And because of the success of the Dark Knight trilogy, he could make like crazy decisions like that. All of a sudden, he was protecting Zack Snyder from WB and letting him do whatever he wanted on Man of Steel. And then there's the BVS story. It's all very, very controversial. But I mean, he took his shot. He made his movies. You can never take Watchmen, Man of Steel, BVS, or the Snyder Cut away from Zack. They're there. Whether you like those films or not, they're there. The question is, will Zack Snyder ever make another DC movie? If he actually does, it will be the most crazy, insane, amazing thing ever.